Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. With things happening in the Pacific, specifically with China and Taiwan, I feel as preppers, we must take a look at this and step back and have an educated understanding of what's happening because it will affect us. It'll affect you and me. So today, and probably tomorrow too, I'm going to have a couple of videos where we need to discuss and talk about what we can do to prepare, because I feel like our government doesn't look at this whole situation the same way we do. I mean, that's no shocker, is it? So we're going to look at a couple articles and we need to see what's happening. This first one's a website called Loomer. I'm not familiar with this, I'll be honest with you, but I don't know if you caught this. The Darien Gap is littered with Chinese-backed stories that provide Starlink and supplies to help Chinese invaders on their trip to the United States. So I'll tell you right off the bat, Loomer, not sure who you are, but kudos to you, Chinese invaders. That's absolutely the way we have to look at this. And it's interesting how they are the number one. Chinese nationals are the number one immigrant, illegal immigrant, mind you, coming across the border into the United States. It is nothing short of an invasion. And again, the government says one thing, but I kind of wonder if they truly know what's going on. In fact, they're probably orchestrating it. And this is a quick article from the Pew Research Center. I don't know if you know them. They're actually pretty good at trying to be unbiased as much as possible. They say that Americans, you and me, name China as the country posing the greatest threat to the United States. I certainly would say that's the case. And look at this, an open-ended question allowing Americans to name which country? 50% of Americans name China. This is not multiple choice. And that's almost 3 times the number of people who say it's Russia. What do you think? I'm going to ask you a question, put it in the comments below. Do you think China poses a bigger threat to the United States? Do you think Russia poses the biggest threat to the United States? And listen, this is not fill in part C where you think America is the biggest threat to the United States. That might be the case. China or Russia? I'm curious what you think. And the government puts out their information, and does it coincide? Not necessarily, because it's interesting. If you look at mainstream media today in our modern times is absolutely tied at the hip with our government. Corporations too. They're all working together to try to force feed us whatever garbage they want to spew out. And what are they putting out? Worry about China? Worry about China? Worry about China? Actually, no, that's pretty rare compared to they're constantly pushing Russia, Russia, Russia. Constantly. Ukraine, NATO, arms, all these people heading into World War III over here when, you know what, it's China. I wonder if that's one we should be looking at. Very curious what you think about that. Now, with this, as far as the government pushing this stuff out, I'm not saying they're oblivious to China. I'm sure they know what's going on, because look what this says. The U.S. deploys 5 aircraft carriers to Indo-Pacific, affirming its strategic forces amid global tensions. Not global, Chinese tensions. That's exactly why they're there. There were already 3 aircraft carriers there in Western Pacific, 2 more on the way. That makes 5 of our 11 strong carriers that will be operating in that region. The U.S. shows strength in Western Pacific, and that's exactly it. These carrier groups are nothing to mess with. A carrier and all its armament and all its incredibly high-tech fighters and bombers are nothing to mess with. But these are carrier groups. Numerous ships and submarines underneath too are showing incredible strength, and we're sending almost half of them, 5 of them, to the Pacific over in that area. Whereas it's interesting, the government keeps saying, look at Russia, look at Ukraine and everything else. So it seems to be a sleight of hand what's going on there. But the biggest thing, and what it comes down to in this video, is this. I mean, obviously we need to prepare. We need to prepare for a world war. We very well may be, and probably are heading in that direction. But when you and I put out information like this and say, hey guys, listen, they're saying Russia, Russia, Russia. And I'm not saying something's not going to happen there. We see what's happening in China. Right now, the U.S. is setting up and strengthening bases all over the Pacific, everywhere, to be ready for China. It's very interesting. Is that who they're actually considering to be the threat? And that's what we come down to. They say Russia's the threat. Another part of the mouth, they may say China is, although I think a lot of our government's in cahoots with China. No, that's not the threat they really foresee. And when we talk about it out in the open like this, that China is really the threat, this is what they say. And this is just one article, mind you. There's tons like this from a little paper from South Brunswick, New Jersey. Domestic terror poses greatest threat to New Jersey, Homeland Security says. Domestic terror. Domestic terror. Really, as we see, and I'm not kidding you, literally millions of nationals coming to the United States, millions coming into the United States. Many of them have been caught on the watch list. Many of them are actually busted saying, yeah, we plan on starting problems here and there. They're making their actions very clear. But yet, it's interesting how Homeland Security, It leaked through this little tiny newspaper, so I applaud you for that. That, the government's not saying, you know what, China, you're the threat, or Russia, you're the threat. You're the threat. That's exactly what they're saying in this. They're saying that we are domestic terrorists. Why? Because we're not going along with their narrative. Homegrown violent extremist and white supremacist. They love using that term any way they can, by the way. Anybody white in their mind, by the way, is a white supremacist, are the largest threat to the state in 2024. Surpassing foreign terror organizations. Seriously? Surpassing anarchists, according to a new report from the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness. So at Goshen Prepping, I try to put out information, obviously, on prepping and on preparedness, but I'm also about truth. I'm also about standing for what I believe in. And when I see countless nationals coming to the United States posing a massive threat, but out of all that, the government says, if they had said, look, we have all these nationals coming in and we have, possible Russia in here in World War. And, one thing we want to consider possibly are some homegrown terrorists. I still wouldn't agree with it, but at least if they put it in that perspective, but they say no. White supremacists are the number one threat in the United States. White supremacists, AKA preppers, I'll be honest with you, that's what they view as being the terrorists in the United States, you and me. And right now, we are free, so to speak, to be able to talk about these things on the channel, whereas YouTube doesn't allow freedom at all with this. It is something that basically they are closing their grasp. The government is closing their grasp on people like us who want to speak the truth on you and me. And eventually a time's going to come where our freedom of speech is going to be snuffed out for this reason, not to mention possibly false flag. So guys, comments below, how are you preparing for the situation? And is there a way to even prepare for this? Guys, prep. Keep going. Prep all you can. We'll see you tomorrow.